Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Stelmach, and I'm glad to present for you the new episode of our daily wrap-up series. On the 368th day of the full-scale aggression, the Ukrainian military fights back the Russian invaders, who are attacking our positions in the Kupiansk-Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Shakhtarsk directions. Last day, Ukrainian defenders repelled 71 enemy attacks, and most importantly, they successfully fought back. Yes, now everyone is waiting for spring, and when the ground melts, then the intensity will decrease a little. But for now, our soldiers, our titans, our guards are holding back the Russian onslaught, especially in the Donetsk region, near Bakhmut and near Avdiivka. Here are some shots from Marinka. It is 25 kilometers from center of Donetsk. Fighting has been going on here since 2014. And since the beginning of the full-scale offensive, the Russians have not been able to advance deep into the Ukrainian positions. But they were able to advance deep into the moral pit. After all, this is not just footage of a frontline city. This is what Putin called the liberation of Donbass. This is how he frees Ukrainians from their usual life, from housing, from the streets they have known since childhood. Yes, until 2014, almost 10,000 people lived on these ashes, a suburb of Donetsk, the Greenwich or Montmartre. And you know, the same story awaits all cities liberated by Russia. We have already seen this more than once. Borodyanka, Mariupol, Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, Soledar and now Bakhmut. Yes, we are talking about Bakhmut Fortress again. Fighting has been going on here for almost a year. For almost a year, the Russians have been trying to seize the Ukrainian city, but without success. Only after razing everything to the ground will they eventually, possibly, I emphasize possibly, be able to capture the city. But for now, there are Ukrainian defenders and Ukrainian journalists. In particular, we saw how the Ukrainian Msta-B howitzer works.
This thing is not difficult. The main thing is to have inspiration and love this toy, and it performs its duties very well. The main thing is that we are given timely charges and shells from them. We have been working on this toy for quite a long time, and it fulfills its functions.
Cannon artillery is a combat cover for Ukrainian infantry. The work of the howitzer helps the fighters repel attacks and carry out a counteroffensive, accurately and quickly strike at the target. Air reconnaissance helps artillery. Holding combat positions and conducting assaults, the military says, is a teamwork.
Recently, it has become a little quieter on their side and feels that they have problems with edge carriage. We also feel it well, and this is really the result of our work, because we explode many of the warehouses.
But the fighting now continues on the entire front line. Not everywhere in the same intensity, but everywhere in the territory. Almost 900 kilometers of the active front line, which is the distance between Washington and Atlanta or between London and Berlin. Just try to travel between these cities and imagine that every second of your trip you see a tank or a howitzer or a trench. This is a reality of Ukraine, but no matter how difficult our warriors stand, moreover, thanks to the support of partners, they beat the enemy.
Against the backdrop of the combat success of the armed force of Ukraine, mass desertion are being observed in the enemy forces. Due to this, Russian deputy commanders for political affairs are effectively attempting to handle it and prevent the desertions. They are trying to communicate the articles of the criminal code that will ensure punishment to the occupiers. In particular, all the invaders are being intimidated by the fact that Russian servicemen who have been in the status of those who have been absent from the military unit without official leave since 2017 have been sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison.
Of course, the Russians do not want deserters. After all, they have gained many criminals in their benches, and they have an increased danger with weapons. And if ordinary people return home, then there is not far from protests and revolutions, because in Ukraine the Russians were able to see that it is possible to live in civilized conditions, not among dirt and dumps. The collective West has only one goal: the Russian Federation collapse. Putin stated this again. He spoke about it 6 months ago when it was not possible to quickly end the war against Ukraine. He spoke about it on February the 21st in an address to the Federal Assembly, and he repeated it the day before. But something has changed in the rhetoric of the Russian dictator. You know what? He is already talking about what will happen to the people of Russia after the collapse. Putin believes that the Russian people will not exist. But I will reassure him, the Russian people will exist, because we Ukrainians are the Russian people, the descendants of the Kievan Rus. Muscovites live in Moscow, and the fact that they have been trying to steal our name since the 17th century does not surprise us. They stole a lot from us. But still, to the main point, Putin believes that Russia can enter the civilized world, as he himself calls the collective West, only in parts.
Судьбы очень многих народов в России
The fate of many peoples in Russia, and above all the Russian people, can change dramatically, just in a drastic way. I don't know whether such an ethnic group as a Russian people can survive in the form in which it exists today. There will be some Muscovites, Urals and so on.
Yes, on the basis of the Russian Empire, there will be new countries in the enslaved nations. When the Roman Empire fell apart, new states were formed instead of the great Roman people. The Gauls, the Greeks. Therefore, it is not necessary to be afraid of it now, especially since the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, also spoke about the disintegration of Russia. He even wrote a column for news. Again, he threatened a nuclear strike and even a nuclear war. This is the main message that will happen to the world after the collapse of Russia. Also, Medvedev mentioned what happened after the collapse of other empires. And this is very good, because he may now understand that there can be no other future in Russia, only disintegration. Because are you ready to live next to a country that will attack its neighbors as soon as it gains strength? And there were and are people in power who threaten the destruction of humanity.
After the heyday of the empire and its golden age, there is a long way to the same final, to disintegration and war, or war and disintegration. This is the world law, and so it happens with us, with the USSR, only in a delayed ration. History also demonstrated something else. Any collapsed empire buries half of the world under its ruins, or even more. It seems that those who first destroyed the USSR and now are trying to destroy the Russian Federation do not want to comprehend this. They have delusional illusion that having sent to the Soviet Union to the other world without a single shot, they will be able to bury present-day Russia without significant problems for themselves. If the question of the existence of Russia itself is seriously raised, it will not be decided on the Ukrainian front, and together with the question of the further existence of the entire human civilization. And there should be no ambiguity here. We don't need a world without Russia. Dmitry Medvedev, President of Russia 2008-2012, in an article for Izvestia.
With this text, Medvedev confirmed several theses that Russian propaganda and historians tried to distort, as if the USSR was not an empire, as if the Russian Federation is a completely different country than the USSR, and of course Russia is not an empire. As you can see, the former president thinks that it is an empire, and as history shows, Russia will face the same fate as any other empire, disintegration. It would happen sooner or later, but it would definitely happen. This is the law of history. You can say that such a sin does not exist, but since we live in historical times, we will see this law in action. And the sooner it happens and Russia collapses, the less suffering and death there will be in the world in general, and in Ukraine in particular.
Losing the conventional war, he says two things. Firstly, we are defending Russia so that we exist, because if we lose, then we will not exist. But here the question must be asked, do the world need you in this form? How do you exist? Secondly, we are losing because we don't know how to fight. We fight in numbers, but in the meantime, we have nuclear weapons. Putin's logic is as follows. A person attacks, kills, and after they first counter hit in the face, he begins to say that Russia is being insulted and it can fall apart. And it will, definitely. If Russia loses, then it loses the meaning of the key concept that Putin constantly sold. Fear Russia, which is a great country. Russia will not be great. So his subjects come to Putin and say that they gave everything and were greatness. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the President of Ukraine.
I really hope that politicians and scientists of all countries are already working on what the world will be like after the collapse of Russia. I hope that they talked about it at the Munich Security Conference. They are talking about it at the UN and the OSCE, and they will talk about it at the G20 meeting. Because if the disintegration of Russia is not brought under control, then it will be chaotic, and chaos brings discomfort to life. Not like war, but it is still better to live in a predictable world. The Council of European Union adopted new 10th package of sanctions against Russia. It's an additional restrictive measure, giving another turn to the screw of the government of the Russian Federation and those responsible for Russia's continuing war of aggression.
Putin is escalating this illegal aggression, weaponizing winter, food and hunger. Russia continues to show its inhuman face with brutal missile terror against civilian targets. Today's 10th package of sanctions targets those who are instrumental in the continuation of this brutal war. We are taking more measures, tackling the banking sector, access to dual-use technology and advanced technologies. We will continue to increase pressure on Russia, and we will do it for as long as needed until Ukraine is liberated from the brutal Russian aggression. Joseph Borrell, High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy.
Today's decision imposes further export bans on critical technology and industrial goods, such as electronics, specialized vehicles, machine parts, spare parts for trucks and jet engines, as well as goods for the construction sector, which can be directed to Russia's military, such as antennas or cranes. Dual-use goods are also targeted. Lastly, further restrictions are imposed on import of goods which generate significant revenues of Russia, such as asphalt and synthetic rubber. In addition to economic sanctions, the Council decided to list a significant amount of additional individuals and entities. 3 Russian banks have been added to the list of entities subject to the asset freeze and the prohibition to make funds and economic resources available.
It is very good that in this package there are sanctions against small and medium banks, and this is an unexpected punch in the gut for the Russian Central Bank, because despite the fact that large banks were already under sanctions, despite having no access to international financial platforms, they still tried to work through small banks, and they did not expect that this loophole would be found and be closed, and this effect of surprise worked quite well.
According to media reports, the 10th package of EU sanctions was very hard to agree to. However, now it is directed against the Russian military industry, propaganda and financial system. However, as Volodymyr Zelensky noted, the pressure on the Russian aggressor must increase. We expect decisive steps against Rosatom and the nuclear industry of the Russian Federation, increased pressure on the military and banks. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching, stay tuned for future videos, and subscribe to our channel. Goodbye.